It was a quiet morning in the luxurious neighborhood where the millionaire's family lived. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a golden glow over the sprawling mansion that seemed like a world of its own. The air was filled with the usual sounds of a busy household, soft footsteps in the marble hallways, the distant clatter of dishes from the kitchen, and the faint hum of the gardener's lawnmower outside. But that morning, something felt different, though no one could quite put their finger on it. Inside the mansion, Emily, the millionaire's only daughter, was supposed to be getting ready for school. She was 17, bright, cheerful, and the center of attention for her family. Her laughter often filled the grand hallways, and her presence was a source of joy for everyone around her. But that day, she was nowhere to be found. At first, her mother, Mrs. Hamilton, thought Emily had simply gone downstairs earlier than usual, or perhaps stepped out to meet a friend. But when she called out her daughter's name and received no reply, a small knot of worry began to form in her chest. By mid-morning, concern turned into panic. Emily's father, Mr. Hamilton, a man used to controlling everything in his life, was now confronted with something he could not manage with wealth or influence. He rushed from room to room, calling out Emily's name, checking her favorite spots, the library where she read, the music room where she played piano, even the garden where she often sat under the old oak tree. Every place was empty, and the feeling of unease grew heavier with each passing minute. The household staff, usually calm and efficient, were suddenly anxious. The cook paused mid-preparation of breakfast, the chauffeur nervously wrung his hands, and the butler's face was unusually pale. They all had known Emily since she was a child, and they loved her as part of the family. But even their concern was tinged with fear. Something about her disappearance did not feel ordinary, it felt wrong, almost impossible, that a young girl could vanish without a trace from such a secure home. Outside the mansion, the news spread faster than anyone could imagine. The family's status ensured that the story would make headlines, but no one knew how seriously to take it at first. Neighbors peeked from behind their curtains, exchanging worried whispers, while local media vans began arriving, cameras at the ready. Social media exploded with speculation, photos of Emily, and urgent messages about her disappearance. Everyone had an opinion. Some blamed the family for not providing enough supervision, others feared something sinister had happened, and a few even wondered if this was some sort of elaborate prank. Amid all this chaos, the police were called. Officers arrived, notebooks in hand, radios buzzing, and questions flying in every direction. They examined the mansion from top to bottom, looking for any clue that might indicate what had happened. They checked doors, windows, and security cameras. They spoke to every staff member, friends, and acquaintances of Emily. But despite all their efforts, nothing explained her sudden disappearance. It was as if she had simply vanished into thin air, leaving no trace behind, and the mystery grew deeper with each passing hour. The family, meanwhile, was overwhelmed by a mixture of fear, frustration, and helplessness. Mr. Hamilton, who had faced many challenges in business, realized that wealth could not solve every problem. No amount of money could replace the sense of dread he felt as he imagined what could have happened to his daughter. Mrs. Hamilton, distraught and tearful, clung to hope but could not ignore the growing fear in her heart. They had built a life of security and comfort, yet in a single moment, that sense of control had slipped away, leaving them vulnerable and desperate. And then there was Mariah, the black maid, who watched everything unfold quietly. Unlike the others, she did not panic immediately. She had known Emily for years, and her bond with the young girl went beyond duty, it was almost like family. She noticed small details that others missed, the slightly open window in the music room, a shoe out of place in the hallway, the faint smell of perfume in an unusual part of the house. While others were focused on panic and speculation, Mariah's mind began working in a different way, piecing together tiny clues that seemed insignificant but might be the key to understanding what had happened. The morning stretched into afternoon, and still, Emily was missing. The mansion, once full of laughter and life, now felt like a quiet shell, filled with tension and uncertainty. Every minute that passed without news made the family's fear grow, and everyone wondered, where could she be? Who might have taken her, and why? Was she in danger, or had she simply wandered off somewhere? The questions hung in the air, unanswered, creating a cloud of suspense that seemed almost tangible. By the end of the day, the reality set in: Emily was truly missing, and no one had the answers. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers waited for updates, their curiosity and concern mixing in a restless energy that spread through the city. Little did anyone know, the person who would change the course of this terrifying day was watching carefully, quietly observing every detail, ready to do something no one else could imagine. In the midst of fear, uncertainty, and chaos, the story of the millionaire's daughter's disappearance had only just begun. The moment the police arrived at the Hamilton mansion, the air felt heavier than ever. While the police scoured the mansion for clues, one figure moved quietly in the background, unnoticed by most but fully aware of everything happening around her. Mariah, the black maid, had worked for the Hamilton family for over a decade, and she knew the mansion better than anyone. Every hallway, every hidden corner, every creaky floorboard whispered its secrets to her. She had watched Emily grow from a playful child into a lively, thoughtful teenager, and their bond had become something deeper than friendship, almost like that of a sister, a protector, and a confidant all rolled into one. Mariah had always been reserved, a woman of few words, but her silence was never emptiness. It was observation, attention, and understanding. She noticed things that others overlooked: the slight twitch in the butler's eyes, the way a visitor lingered a little too long in Emily's room, the subtle movements of objects that seemed out of place. These small details, meaningless to most, were the threads of a puzzle that only she could see forming. While the police relied on evidence and interviews, Mariah relied on instinct and memory, skills sharpened by years of attentiveness and loyalty. No one knew much about Mariah's past, and perhaps that was why she seemed so enigmatic. Some staff members whispered stories about her childhood in a small town far away, about hardships she had endured before finding work in the Hamilton household. Others guessed she had always been clever, quietly surviving in a world that rarely looked kindly on someone like her. But no one could argue with her dedication. She had cared for Emily as if she were her own, and her actions now would show just how much she was willing to do when the situation demanded it. That evening, as the family and police continued to fret over Emily's disappearance, Mariah began her own quiet investigation. She retraced Emily's last known movements in the house, inspecting every room with painstaking attention. A diary left slightly open on the desk, a scarf that had fallen behind the couch, a book that had been moved from its shelf, each detail told her a story that no one else seemed to notice. She catalogued them mentally, forming connections and hypotheses in her mind. The small inconsistencies that had been dismissed by others now appeared like glaring clues to her trained eyes. Mariah also paid attention to the people coming and going from the mansion. Delivery personnel, family friends, and even visitors who claimed to have legitimate reasons to be there, all were noted, their behaviors remembered. She could sense tension, nervousness, and dishonesty in ways that others could not, and she began to suspect that Emily's disappearance was not random. Someone had planned it, and if she wanted to help, she would have to move carefully, outsmarting those who believed they could control the situation. Despite her fear, Mariah did not let panic take over. She understood the danger that might lie ahead. People underestimate quiet, observant individuals, assuming that silence is weakness, but Mariah knew otherwise. Her strength was in thinking ahead, in noticing what others missed, and in having the patience to act at the right moment. She realized that the family, powerful as they were, and the police, experienced as they were, might not see what she saw because they lacked the intimacy and understanding she had developed over years of service. As night fell, Mariah sat quietly in the kitchen, sipping a cup of tea, her eyes scanning the mansion through the window. The gardens were dark, and the shadows of the trees seemed alive with possibility. She imagined where Emily could be, what dangers she might face, and how she could act to find her. In that stillness, a plan began to take shape. Every instinct told her that Emily was alive, and that the key to finding her lay not in brute force or fear, but in careful observation, courage, and decisive action. Mariah's mind worked like a machine, connecting the tiniest details into a web that could lead to Emily. She considered the people who had access to the mansion, the times when doors were unlocked, the patterns of movement around the property. Each thought strengthened her resolve. Unlike the others, she was not distracted by panic or media attention. Her loyalty, intelligence, and quiet determination became her weapons. By the end of the night, Mariah had made a silent promise to herself. She would not wait for someone else to solve this mystery. She would do everything in her power to find Emily, no matter how dangerous or impossible it seemed. She had the knowledge, the courage, and the determination needed to face what others feared to even consider. And as she finally rested her head, she knew that the real challenge had only just begun. The mansion had settled into an uneasy quiet, but Mariah could feel the tension in the air like electricity. The police were still investigating, checking every room, questioning every staff member, but to them, Emily's disappearance was a series of disconnected events. To Mariah, however, small details were beginning to form a pattern, a trail that only she could see. She knew that if she could piece it together, she might be able to act before it was too late. The first clue came in the library. Emily's favorite book lay on the floor, not on the shelf where it belonged. It wasn't unusual for Emily to leave a book lying around, but this one was positioned oddly, as if someone had been searching for something and dropped it in a hurry. Mariah bent down to pick it up and noticed something unusual. The book had faint fingerprints in the corner that did not belong to Emily or anyone in the household. It was a small detail, but in her mind, it was significant. Someone had been here, and they had been careful, but not careful enough. Next, Mariah checked Emily's room. The curtains were slightly shifted, and the window latch was loose. To the casual eye, it seemed like nothing, but Mariah had learned to trust small signs. She crouched by the window and noticed faint scratches near the lock, scratches that could have been made by a key or a tool used to open it. Her heart raced as she realized this was not an accident. Someone had deliberately entered or exited through the window, and it might have been Emily herself trying to escape, or worse, someone taking her away. As she moved through the hallway, Mariah noticed a faint trail in the marble floor, almost invisible, a tiny scuff mark near the doorway to the music room. Emily often played the piano here, and Mariah remembered her running back and forth between the room and the garden. But these scuff marks were different, they seemed hurried, as if someone had moved quickly through the house, leaving a trace only a trained eye could see. It was subtle, but it told a story of movement, panic, and urgency. Mariah's next observation was even more telling. In the kitchen, a cup that Emily always used for morning tea was missing from its usual spot. At first glance, it seemed insignificant, but Mariah knew Emily never left things in the wrong place unless she was distracted or rushed. The cup's absence suggested Emily had been interrupted or had left in a hurry. And if she had left in a hurry, Mariah thought, someone might have followed her, or someone might have orchestrated the entire event. The final clue of the day came from a sound she almost didn't notice. As she walked through the main hallway, her ears caught a faint tapping, a sound from the attic that did not belong. Mariah paused, straining to listen. It was rhythmic, deliberate, and repeated. Most would have ignored it, assuming it was the house settling or the wind brushing against a window. But Mariah knew better. The sound was intentional, like a message or a sign left by someone who had been in the house, someone who might be connected to Emily's disappearance. By now, Mariah had a growing sense of clarity. The evidence was subtle, almost invisible to anyone who didn't know the house intimately. But she did. She could see the invisible threads, the hidden connections, and the signs that pointed to a deeper story. Each clue made her more certain that Emily had not left on her own, and that the people involved had underestimated someone in the house, her. Her mind raced with possibilities. Who could have been in the mansion? Was it someone who had a grudge against the family, or someone who had planned this carefully to avoid suspicion? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that the answers were close, hidden in plain sight. She just needed to follow the trail patiently, observe every movement, and trust her instincts. Mariah's confidence grew with every step. While the police were relying on standard procedures and official evidence, she had intuition, loyalty, and an intimate knowledge of the house that no outsider could match. She began forming a mental map, connecting the scratches, the misplaced items, and the subtle sounds into a single picture. She was beginning to see where Emily might have gone, and what she might need to do to bring her back safely. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the mansion, Mariah stood at the top of the staircase, looking down at the hallway that held so many secrets. She knew that every minute counted, and that the clues she had gathered were the keys to finding Emily. The mansion, which had once felt like a home, now felt like a labyrinth, full of hidden messages and signs. And Mariah, quiet, observant, and determined, understood that she was the only one who could read them correctly. By the following morning, the mansion had become a place of tension and quiet urgency. The police continued their investigation, their questions repetitive, their eyes scanning the familiar halls without seeing the subtle clues that Mariah had already discovered. But for her, there was no time to wait. She had pieced together enough hints to know that Emily's life could be in danger, and every passing minute made the situation more urgent. Mariah understood something the others did not. If she didn't act, Emily might not be found in time. Mariah had always been careful, quiet, and disciplined, but now she knew caution alone would not be enough. She would have to take risks, make decisions without confirmation, and trust her instincts, even if no one else believed her. The thought of leaving the mansion alone, facing the unknown, or confronting dangerous people would have terrified anyone else, but for Mariah, it ignited a spark of determination. Fear was a tool, not a barrier, and she was determined to use it to her advantage. Her first step was to explore the mansion thoroughly again, but this time, she went beyond what was obvious. She checked hidden spaces, the attic, the basement, and the seldom-used service corridors. She noticed that certain areas of the mansion had been avoided or overlooked by the police, corners where a small detail might hold the key to Emily's location. A broken latch here, a smudge of dirt there, each tiny clue confirmed what Mariah already suspected: someone had been careful, but they had underestimated her. Mariah also began tracking the comings and goings of everyone connected to the mansion. Staff, friends, delivery people, she quietly observed their movements, noting anything unusual. A lingering glance, a hesitant step, a quick exit, all became part of her mental map. She realized that someone outside the family might be involved, or that Emily had been led away by someone she trusted. But more importantly, Mariah began considering how she could use these observations to her advantage. Every risk she took now would have to be calculated. Every action had to be precise. As the day wore on, Mariah decided it was time to confront her first challenge. She returned to the study, where she had noticed the fingerprints in Emily's favorite book. Using gloves she found in the mansion, she carefully examined the book, comparing it to her memory of Emily's habits. She also tested small methods to reveal hidden messages, folds in the pages, scratches on the edges, even faint smudges of ink that might have been left by someone else. It was meticulous work, slow and painstaking, but she understood that rushing could ruin the only lead she had. Mariah's determination was fueled not only by her love for Emily but also by the frustration of watching others overlook what was right in front of them. The police, though professional, were relying on standard procedures. The family, though frantic, could only guess at what had happened. But Mariah had something more powerful than training or authority: intuition, knowledge of the house, and an unshakable will to protect Emily. She realized that if she wanted to succeed, she would have to act independently, even if it meant risking her safety or facing criticism from those who underestimated her. By evening, Mariah had devised a plan. She would continue her investigation in secret, following the subtle clues that pointed toward Emily's possible location. She knew that she might have to confront dangerous people, navigate unfamiliar areas, and rely entirely on her wits. Yet, she did not hesitate. Every instinct, every observation, and every memory she had of the mansion and its hidden corners guided her decisions. The risk was high, but the stakes were higher. Emily's life was at risk, and Mariah was willing to do whatever it took. Before nightfall, she took a moment to prepare mentally. She reviewed every clue, imagined every possible scenario, and anticipated obstacles that could arise. Mariah understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. And as she took her first steps into the part of the mansion that had been ignored by everyone else, she felt a sense of clarity. The impossible task, finding Emily and keeping her safe, was daunting, but not beyond her. She had the determination, the skill, and the courage needed to face the unknown. The mansion was silent, but Mariah's mind was alive with possibilities. Every shadow, every creak, every flicker of light became meaningful. She was no longer merely a maid quietly observing the household, she had become a strategist, a protector, and the only person capable of turning a desperate situation into a chance for rescue. The night stretched ahead, full of unknown dangers, but Mariah felt ready. The risk was immense, but her determination burned brighter than ever, guiding her through the darkness, one careful step at a time. The night was dark and silent, the mansion draped in shadows that seemed almost alive. The night air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of wet earth and city lights. Mariah led Emily carefully through the shadows, her movements deliberate and silent. Every step felt like walking on a knife's edge, one wrong sound, one wrong glance, and everything could fall apart. Emily clung to her, trembling, but her trust in Mariah was absolute. After all, this quiet, observant woman had been her guide, protector, and now her savior. Outside the warehouse, the city seemed calm, unaware of the drama unfolding in its hidden corners. Mariah knew they weren't safe yet. There could be other threats waiting, or someone might notice Emily's absence and pursue them. Her mind worked rapidly, calculating every possibility, every escape route. She had come prepared, not with weapons, but with knowledge, patience, and the courage that had carried her this far. Each shadow, each flicker of movement in the dark, was accounted for. The guard inside the warehouse had been distracted by a sound Mariah had cleverly created, a thrown object that clattered just enough to pull his attention away. That small, calculated risk had given Mariah the perfect opportunity to free Emily. Now, moving outside, she needed the same precision. The streets were quiet, but she kept Emily low, her steps measured. Mariah's heart pounded, yet her mind remained sharp, mapping the safest path back to the mansion. As they navigated the empty streets, Emily's fears slowly began to fade. She whispered softly, "Mariah, how did you?" But Mariah gently shook her head, signaling her to stay quiet. Words were unnecessary. The relief in Emily's eyes, the slow return of her color to her cheeks, and the small but steady breaths told Mariah everything she needed to know. Emily was alive, and they were almost safe. Finally, they reached the mansion. The familiar silhouette of the grand building offered a sense of hope that the dark streets had not. Mariah guided Emily to a side entrance she knew would be less observed, the one she had always used when moving quietly around the house. Inside, the warmth and familiar smells wrapped around them like a protective shield. Mariah led Emily to her room first, making sure she was safe, calming her trembling hands, and letting her absorb the reality, she was home. But the mission was not over yet. Mariah had to ensure that those responsible for Emily's disappearance were stopped. She quietly observed the mansion, listening for signs of movement outside, coordinating with the police who had been alerted at the right moment. When the authorities arrived, guided discreetly by Mariah's instructions, they caught the intruders off guard. Mariah's keen observation had given them the upper hand, ensuring that Emily's rescue remained intact and that no further harm could come to her. The revelation of Mariah's role spread quickly through the family. Mr. and Mrs. Hamilton, overwhelmed by relief, embraced Emily tightly, tears streaming down their faces. Then they turned to Mariah, their eyes wide with disbelief and gratitude. "You saved her," Mr. Hamilton whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "You did the impossible." Mariah only nodded quietly, humility radiating from her, but inside, she felt a quiet pride. She had trusted her instincts, observed what others had missed, and acted decisively. That combination had made the impossible possible. The story of the rescue did not remain confined to the mansion. Soon, neighbors, friends, and even the media learned about the extraordinary courage of the black maid who had defied expectations and risked everything to save Emily. Mariah's actions challenged assumptions about who could be a hero, proving that loyalty, intelligence, and courage could triumph over fear and danger. For Emily, this night would never be forgotten, the terror of being taken, the relief of being rescued, and the quiet, steadfast presence of the woman who had risked everything to bring her home. By the early hours of the morning, the mansion was calm again. Emily slept peacefully in her bed, safe and warm, while Mariah sat quietly in the kitchen, sipping a cup of tea she hadn't touched in hours. She allowed herself a small, private smile, knowing that she had done what no one else could. In that quiet moment, she reflected on the power of observation, patience, and courage. The impossible had been achieved, and it had been achieved through determination, clever thinking, and a fearless heart. For the Hamilton family, Mariah was no longer just a maid. She was a hero, a protector, and a reminder that sometimes the greatest strength comes from those who are quietly watching, thinking, and daring to act when it matters most. And as dawn broke, bathing the mansion in golden light, the ordeal of the night became a story of courage, hope, and the incredible impact of one person who refused to be powerless. The mansion was quiet, bathed in the soft golden light of early morning. The chaos of the previous days had faded, replaced by a calm that felt almost surreal. Emily slept soundly in her room, wrapped in the warmth and security of home, while the city outside slowly returned to its ordinary rhythm. But inside the Hamilton household, nothing would ever feel quite the same again. Mariah moved silently through the familiar halls, her steps measured, yet light with a sense of accomplishment. She had done what no one else could. She had followed subtle clues, taken calculated risks, and faced danger with courage and intelligence. Emily was safe because Mariah had refused to wait, refused to be powerless, and refused to let fear control her. In that quiet moment, she reflected on everything that had happened, the fear, the tension, the relentless determination that had carried her through the darkness, and she allowed herself a small, private smile. The Hamilton family emerged from the rooms one by one, their expressions a mixture of relief, gratitude, and awe. Mr. Hamilton approached Mariah first, his usual commanding presence softened by emotion. "Mariah," he said, his voice shaking, "you saved our daughter. We can never thank you enough." Mrs. Hamilton stepped forward, tears in her eyes, placing a hand gently on Mariah's shoulder. "You were our only hope, and you did the impossible." For Mariah, their words mattered, but they were not the reason she had acted. She had never been motivated by recognition or reward. Her loyalty, her quiet courage, and her careful observations had been enough to guide her through the ordeal. Yet she understood that her actions would now be seen by the world, and she felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her bravery had made a difference. In that moment, she realized something important: true heroism is not about fame, power, or wealth. It is about doing what is right, even when no one is watching. The story of the rescue spread quickly, captivating the media and the public. People were fascinated by the tale of the black maid who had risked everything to save the millionaire's daughter. Headlines praised her intelligence, bravery, and quick thinking. Interviews revealed the subtle details of her observations, the faint scratches, the misplaced objects, the careful attention that had led to Emily's rescue. The world marveled at how someone so unassuming could accomplish something so extraordinary, and Mariah remained humble, allowing the story to highlight Emily's safe return rather than her own heroism. In the days that followed, the Hamilton family made sure Mariah knew her importance to them. She was no longer just a maid or a household employee, she was a protector, a trusted confidant, and a hero whose actions had changed the course of their lives. Emily, in particular, clung to her, sharing moments of laughter and quiet conversation that strengthened a bond formed through fear, courage, and trust. They celebrated not just Emily's safety, but also Mariah's unwavering determination, understanding that without her, the outcome could have been tragically different. The experience left an indelible mark on everyone involved. The family became more aware of the value of loyalty, observation, and courage, and they realized that true strength often comes from those who are quiet, patient, and willing to act when it matters most. For Mariah, the ordeal reinforced her understanding of her own abilities. She had faced fear, taken risks, and succeeded where others had failed. The impossible had been accomplished, not through wealth or power, but through intelligence, courage, and unwavering commitment. As the days turned into weeks, life slowly returned to normal in the mansion, but the lessons of that night lingered. Emily thrived, her gratitude for Mariah's bravery shaping the way she saw the world. The family grew closer, realizing that security was not just about wealth or status, it was about vigilance, trust, and courage. And for Mariah, the experience left her with a quiet pride, a recognition of her own strength, and a knowledge that she had changed a life forever. In the end, the story of Emily's disappearance and rescue became more than just a tale of fear and suspense. It became a story of hope, loyalty, and the extraordinary power of ordinary people. It reminded everyone that heroism is not always loud or celebrated, sometimes it is quiet, patient, and unseen until the moment it matters most. And as the mansion settled into its peaceful rhythm once more, Mariah understood that she had done more than rescue a life, she had left a legacy of courage, determination, and the belief that the impossible can be made possible by those willing to act when it counts the most.